Welcome to an evening
Hey.
with Rebecca McClanahan. I'm Ada Fitzgerald. I'm owner of Main Street Books here in Davidson, North Carolina. Tonight, I'm pleased to host this literary conversation in partnership with Charlotte Writers Club North. Charlotte Writers Club North is a network of writers in the Lake Norman area, associated also with the main chapter in Charlotte, that has a really robust series of workshops and events that support our local writing community. And we are just always delighted to host events in partnership with Charlotte Writers Club North. And for tonight's conversation with Rebecca McClanahan, longtime Charlotte Writers Club North member and leadership committee member Gilda Syverson is here in conversation. Gilda is the author of 2 books of poetry, in addition to her memoir, My Father's Daughter, From Rome to Sicily. Her memoir was a Novello Literary Award finalist and a nominee for the Reagan Old North State Award for Nonfiction. Gilda has taught memoir writing for over 20 years, including 15 years at Queen's University of Charlotte. Welcome, Gilda.
Hello, Ada.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks so much for being here tonight. We are so excited to hear from Rebecca.
Oh, yes, I am too. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I appreciate your words, and also want to thank Beth, who is working behind the scenes with me on this event. Thank you both. And we are grateful to you, Ada, and Main Street Books in Davidson, North Carolina, and of course to the Charlotte Writers Club for both sponsoring this event tonight in the key of New York City, honoring Rebecca McClanahan and her recently published book. Let me tell you something a little bit about Rebecca. I am delighted to introduce you to her. She is the author of 11 books spanning memoir, essays, poetry, and the writing craft. Her work has appeared in Best American Essays, Best American Poetry, Georgia Review, Gettysburg Review, Kenyon Review, Boulevard, The Sun, and numerous anthologies published by Beacon Press, Norton, Doubleday, among many other publishers. Rebecca is the recipient of 2 Pushcart Prizes and the Glasgow Award in nonfiction, the Wood Prize from Poetry Magazine, and the Carter Prize for the essay. Rebecca teaches at the Kenyon Review Writers Workshop and the MFA programs of Rainier Writing Workshop and at Queen's University's, which is close by here in Charlotte. Rebecca's newest book, In the Key of New York City, is a memoir and essays, and it was published this past year in 2020. I often wonder how in the world anyone got something published in 2020 and it done as well as Rebecca has. So this is what her book looks like, and I'll be talking a little bit about it in a minute. And in the meantime, let's welcome Rebecca on board.
Hello, all of you out there. Are you there?
Yeah.
You know, when we were kids, we used to play hide and seek, you know, and if you were it, you had to hide your eyes, you know, but I would often say, I can't see you, but I hear you breathing. But I can't really even hear you breathing, but I trust that you are. I hope that you are. And thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Gilda, for this opportunity, and Main Street Books and Charlotte Writers Club, and all of you make it possible. I was thinking yesterday that you know, Zoom is so hard. As you all know, we're all in this world that we're in together right now. But I was thinking about Zoom and the fact that I can't hear you or really see you. And I'm just kind of speaking like a crazy person into this computer. But you know what? That's a kind of like what writers do. We really do write into the silence with trust and hope that the universe may at some point give back its kept secret, let's say. So maybe that's what we've been doing all along, is kind of doing this, and so I'm not too worried about that. But yeah, so yeah, I'm going to open with just the very, very beginning of. And just a little background in case you don't know. So yes, I am right now in Charlotte, North Carolina. And but this book is about the years that my husband and I, about 11 years, spent in New York City. It was really crazy. It was something that we talked about for many decades. Well, I wouldn't say many decades, I'm not that old, but decades, I would say. And you know how you talk about things, oh, one day we should do this, or we should do this. Well, we'd always talked about living in New York City. He had some family connections there. And we had spent lots and lots of time there throughout the years. So one day we went there for Donald's 50th birthday, and we were walking on 8th Avenue, and we just looked at each other. It's like, okay, if we're going to do it, we better just do it. And so we really did. We went back to Charlotte, and we put our house on the market. We quit our jobs. We left our families and our friends, even our cat, and we went to New York City. And it was really, really interesting. And so, yeah, it was. We thought we had enough to last 2 years from the sale of our house, and if we did not find jobs. But anyway, we lasted 11 years, so things went well, but it was a little rough beginning. So I'm just open from the beginning here. And
Rebecca, as you're
yes.
getting ready to get that,
Yeah,
I just, as you start, I just wanted to point out the beautiful cover of this book. I just think it's exquisite, and the name of, the name in the key of New York City, and the beautiful music scale is a great, I think, entry into your memoir, actually. And because we hear the musical sounds of New York City that you hear and share as the book opens. And I think that particular metaphor is really significant. So, so it's all yours.
Yeah. And, in the key, of course, I was trained in music, and I love it. And so there is that in the key, the sounds, the cacophony of the subway and all of the noises, this private noises you hear as you put your ear to the neighbor's walls in the apartment building where you are. We actually ended up getting a sublet, see. So we sold or gave away most of what we had, and moved into someone else's life, which is a whole other experience. But yeah, and so we didn't know anyone. And so I would guess from what I heard in the walls who the neighbors were above us or below us. And being a writer, I do imagine. And so there was that sound of music, but also just the city sounds. And yes, there's a lot of it. But, there's also the key that opens into any kind of new world that you have. So yeah, the mayor didn't give us a key to New York City, just saying. It was a pretty hard opening, but yes, thank you for pointing that out. And I tried out 3 or 4 different titles, and they were all pretty lame. And so I was happy when I landed on that one. So here's the opening to the book. Artillery sounds wake me, car alarms screeching, beeping, you know the drill, and a jackhammer breaking open the sidewalk outside our window. No, not our window, the window of the apartment we've been subletting this past year, and the lease is almost up. Another year, my husband is leaving it up to me. Donald could live anywhere. He's that kind of guy, easy, adaptable, like the ducks in the park. Things just roll right off his back. When we first moved to the city, we couldn't believe how cheap the flowers were. What a city, we said. We can buy flowers every week, fill the apartment with in the bathtub. What a city. Then we went to the grocery store, and I started to cry. Oh my, we'll have to give up Oh my God, I shrieked, what shall we eat? We'll just have to eat flowers, Donald said. Last week, I would have signed a 100-year lease. I was just coming off one of my New York highs, the kind that hit you when you least expected it. And suddenly it's like first love again, first lust. And you wonder how you could possibly live anywhere else. Then a steam pipe bursts. The couple in the apartment above you straps their steel-heeled boots back on. You step in a puddle of urine on the subway platform, and some guy with 3 rings in his nose calls you bitch and spits on you because who knows, you look like his 2nd grade teacher or some president's wife or his mother. And you think, live another year in this jackhammering, siren screaming, piss puddling city in someone else's apartment, in someone else's bed, with someone else's plates, forks, spoons? Maybe it's the wrong day to decide. Maybe I need some air. Maybe I need a sign. So I go where I always go when I need a sign, to Central Park. And oh, look, a day so beautiful you'd gladly pay if the universe were charging. The leaves on the ginkgos are falling, gold coins upon gold coins. And there in the pond are my ducks. How I admire them. Look, one is passing up breadcrumbs to catch a blossom. He's eating flowers. Along the promenade are the inline skaters in their t-shirts. Kickamus, Maximus, Assimus. Are you talking to me? Fun-loving criminal. One guy is skating backwards, a small, compact man, so graceful he doesn't need skates. His hip bones are on ball bearings, rolling in one smooth movement. But I know it's harder than it looks, isn't everything? If you peek beneath the surface of the water, you can see the ducks' paddle wheel feet working, churning. It breaks your heart. Little New York ducks have to keep moving all the time. And then I know that you know this, Gilda, but it moves into one of the many, many encounters I have with my bench guys, the people on the park benches in New York. And yeah, with all their signs. So that first essay moves into that and my encounter with them, which came to be a very important part of our experience in New York. So there's the benches.
Yeah, that was exactly what I had lined up next. I thought, I love the benches. I know a little later you have a title, Adopt a Bench, but and I love the line that you wrote. Not everyone can afford to adopt a Central Park bench and personalize it with a plaque, but it costs nothing to sit on one. And I always, while I was reading the book, I always loved coming back to Central Park, and the benches.
Yeah, I mean, that, as I say at the end of that essay, our lives are sublets anyway, and too quickly gone at that. And what better place to live out our place? Yeah, the bench was very important. It was, it's a perch, writers observe. We look, so it's a safe place. You're kind of home. You've got your own seat, except when one of them takes your favorite bench. I'm just saying, but you have your bench, and you can look but feel safe. And then if someone sits next to you, they definitely strike up conversations and say some amazing ones. Like Ray, the guy I just met right after that, and we started to talk about his paintings and the bonfire of his paintings, and I would ask him about things about, well, did you see this? He says, I was thinking about Moses and the burning bush. So we talked about religion a while. I told him I used to be a backup singer, but I was just a lowly singer in this gospel choir. And he looked at me and he said, never call yourself lowly. And I thought, okay, I can learn something from these guys. I really can. So yeah, a lot of benches.
Yeah, a lot of benches.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to read anything about the benches?
I don't think so.
You don't have to.
Yeah. I think I'll talk just a little, read a really like 2 pages or something here about the inside sounds, and how I kind of spied through my ears on the people that were next to us in the apartment. It was, yeah, it was kind of interesting to try to make a community in New York. It's quite different. I mean, I'm a military brat, grew up, so I lived in so many places, and you'll hear some of the places when I read this. But
Yeah,
I thought I was good at becoming, blending in, making a community. But every place you go to is a little bit different, and I found that it was quite difficult. I couldn't use some of the things that I've used before in order to make a community. There was.
Why do you think that was, Rebecca? Do you think it was the city? Do you think it was the quality of the city?
Oh, yeah, well, partly. Yeah, it's just different. I mean, one of the reasons we really wanted to move to New York was to have encounters with lots of people, to be on the street, to not be just driving through town and kind of seeing, here's the way this neighborhood lives, and here's the way we live, and here's my my chosen space, and so that was one of the reasons why we wanted to move to New York. But I also realized, and I got to get this after a few years of my own there and living, is that because we live so close in New York, that door separates you from what one of my New York friends says, the chaos. She was just, couldn't believe that I would actually do what I write about in this book at one point, which is actually get so desperate for neighbors to meet them that I actually bake cookies and go door to door and knock on them. And she goes, "Oh my God, you didn't do that. You never do that." And then the opera singer who lived next door to us, I'd listen and I had to tell him, knowing the works he was doing, how beautiful and wonderful his music was. I thought that would be a great thing to tell him. That was not a good thing to tell him. He, oh my God, I didn't want anyone to hear. I was practicing. How awful to disturb a neighbor. So, you learn about that. But anyway.
You came up from the South. You came up from Charlotte, and when you get up there, I have a sister who lives in that area, and I went to visit her one day, and she just said, "You said," and I said, "Thank you," and then I said, "Thank you again," and she said, "You've already said it once. Don't say it another time." Because here in Charlotte, we do things differently than
maybe, but I'm not a Southerner really. Like I say, I'm a military brat, so I've moved a lot of places. I didn't consider myself a Southerner. I think I was just reaching out for community, as you do. And because we had kind of pulled the plug on so much of our life, and I was really lonely for a long time. So I did some pretty pathetic things, but I got really close to the Con Ed guy who came once a month to read the meter, and he loved the cookies, and I baked for him all the time. Yeah. Things got better. I'm just saying they really got better. I'm going to read a little bit about that. But also just about being an outsider and how we all come from somewhere else. We really do. And like I say, I've lived in a lot of places, and you'll hear some of these here. And I think that's something that I've been thinking about so much in the last couple of years. And this whole idea of this go back where you came from thing that we hear, and okay, well, let's think about where we came from. Let's think about the fact that we are all in some ways strangers. And for writers, I know there's a lot of writers out there. And I think that the stance of the newcomer, not really alien, but the newcomer, the beginner, the out of place person is a wonderful stance from which to write. Because I think when you're new anywhere, your feelers are up. You're being careful, you're looking around, you're observant, you are not complacent. And so I think that, and the reader likes to go with you, because we've all been beginners, we've all been lonely. We've all been in a new place at some point in our life. And so that's just a little thing that I've noticed about writing from that stance. But yeah, okay. So here's a couple of years in. This is actually in one of there are two long 9/11 essays that are segmented essays. And this is in part of that happened leading up to 9/11. And one thing, our apartment was very, very dark. We only had light about 1 hour a day, and I really missed light. So that's important. When the first signs of light appear, I get up from my desk and move to the green rug. I lie on my back, kick off my shoes, let the brightness pour over my face, my feet. Some days I think of my family and friends in North Carolina, the house we sold, the 100-year-old oaks that shaded our yard, the lost garden and its changing light. But most days now, I just say thank you to no one in particular for this city, for the miracle of millions of toilets flushing all at once, for cheap, abundant flowers and unidentifiable produce on street corners, for the rich broth of languages I hear on my walks, for the public library where the checkout clerk stands on a stool, a woman with thalidomide sprouts for arms and a scar down the side of her face who stamps whatever book I bring to her without asking any questions. New York is a great place to be noticed or not to be noticed, to find yourself or to lose yourself, depending on what you need. But now a horn is blaring down on the street and other horns are joining in. What is it this time? I go to the window to investigate. A fancy sedan is stopped in the middle of the street sideways, blocking the yellow cab behind it. A tall, well-dressed woman gets out of the sedan and marches over to the cab. She's fuming, screaming at the cab driver that she's just trying to park her car, but he won't give her an inch. And how is she supposed to back into a space with him right behind her like that, blasting his horn? The cab driver, who looks Middle Eastern, jumps out of the cab and stands nose to nose with the woman, shouting something I can't make out. I'm thinking it might come to physical blows. Then she screams, "Go back where you came from." And someone on the sidewalk below my window, I can't see who it is, applauds. Go back where you came from? What would that mean for New York? I imagine the streets emptying, like you do when you show a film in reverse. Time sucking us backwards, the sky filling with bodies, all of us hurtling back to where we came from. The cab driver back to Saudi Arabia or Pakistan. The super and his wife and children linked in a chain of hands flying out of their basement apartment and into the air above the Atlantic heading toward Montenegro. The ashes of Donald's grandparents reconstructing into bones, skin, cells, then swirling back to Chicago, Canada, Switzerland, and finally into a small village outside St. Petersburg. All of us disappearing, even me, sucked through the streets of New York and down to North Carolina, then to South Carolina, to Maryland, California, then back into Virginia, Texas, Illinois, finally landing in Indiana, in the nursery of a small hospital in Tippecanoe County, my thumb in my mouth, and still the film keeps rolling backwards, 100 years, another 100 years, another. Where are they now? The streets of New York, the towns of the past, the land where things disappear. No more. All that's left is forest, river, sky, and a few hundred gray squirrels high in the trees, building their lopsided nests.
Rebecca, what a beautiful way of taking us back. We're all strangers at some point and we keep going back. And then you end with the squirrel, which is such a huge part of your, which is a good chapter in your book. But I love how you take us back in your own life and keep going back and back. And that piece is right around the whole chapter on the squirrel. which was something I was especially attracted to, the squirrel, and how you begin this relationship with the squirrel. And first you couldn't wait to get rid of it. And then it was hard for you to let the squirrel go. And, I love that part about your sister's interest in alternative medicine. And so she called you from, an older sister at that, calls you from California and says, maybe there's a reason for the squirrel, that the squirrel has appeared in your life. Do you want to talk about the squirrel a little bit?
The squirrel. Yeah.
But there was more to the squirrel than just, there was a lot about your own experience.
Yeah, well, it was very strange. But yes, there are two, like I said, long essays surrounding 9/11, nothing about it.
Right.
I did that purposely to give the reader their own white space in the middle to walk into their own experience. But coming up, and because again, this is a nonfiction book, this is a memoir, and so there's a essay before 9/11 called "And We Shall Be Changed," which is from Handel's Messiah. We shall be changed, the baritone solo, which my neighbor had been practicing for, because he was in September. They start rehearsing for the Messiah, and he had been practicing that. And so this essay is called "We Shall Be Changed, New York City, September 7th through 11th. Mm-hmm. And I keep it writer's notebook. It's not really a journal, but I keep notes about things that are happening in the day, so that I kind of had a record. So if later I see that something's bubbling up and maybe an essay is going to happen, I will go back to those notes. And so two things that happened on September 7th that were very odd to me. One was, we were in a fifth floor apartment. It was an old apartment, but had a chimney, had a fireplace. And on the 7th, Donald and I had tickets to see Sebastião Salgado exhibit after work. By then, Donald had a job and I was teaching. And we were going to meet at the International Center of Photography to see Salgado's exhibit on migrations. I think there were 40 countries he traveled to, and it was his photography exhibit about migrants. And so we had tickets to that. And then that morning, we heard this tremendous crash. I write about it, but I don't have time to read it. But something dropped through our chimney and began running around our house. We thought it was mice because we were keeping score, because there were so many mice in our apartment. We'd be like, humans 5, mice 16, So we figured it was that, but it was indeed a squirrel. And so by then we had a new cat, and the cat was very interested in the squirrel. So there was a flurry of activity. But at any rate, that squirrel, we were able to capture him he stayed on the balcony, this little tiny Juliet balcony. And so what happened, the reason I began to write this, which I rarely write an essay right when it's happening, but because of the collision of the Salgado exhibit and this squirrel dropping in as an immigrant into our apartment, and I just couldn't not go, what a strange thing. So I started writing this essay. And then the morning of 9/11, the squirrel is still with us, but anyway, you'll have to read the book to see. But we actually were able finally to capture him in the cat carrier. And I was in Central Park when I heard the sirens begin. So yeah, the squirrel was quite important. And there were 3 things then that hit. And I thought, okay, yes, this is an essay. And so that's exactly where I was. By the time I came back the 6 blocks, from Central Park to our apartment, I had probably 10 or 11 messages on the machine, people trying to call to see, and I had no idea what was going on. So yeah, the squirrel, he was there.
Yeah, I find, when you leave him and you leave him out in Central Park, I love how you moved into the next section of the book. There's your white space, the 8th Avenue movement or moment. I'm sorry, the 8th Avenue moment. It's so brief, but it's so poignant, and it gives you that white space that I found really powerful in the group of essays. And then we move into September 11th, like you said, without really talking about September 11th.
Yeah, the aftermath. I'll read that half. It's a half page. It's the shortest. There's a the book has some long essays in it, and some long narratives, some segmented essays, and it's got a lot of flash pieces broken up. And this is the shortest. I'll just read it. It's a half a page.
Yeah, it's a great read.
It's called 8th Avenue Moment. A young man stumbles toward me, something dark and feathered bundled in his arms. He looks up, red eyes, distillery breath. You know anything about pigeons, he says. No, I say. I love animals, he says, the ones on the farm when I was young. He holds the pigeon out to me. What's wrong with him? Looks like he's dying, I say. Why? Things die. I'm sorry. I love animals, he says. I'm sorry. I love you too, he says.
Beautiful, Rebecca.
Well, he said it. I didn't. I just wrote it down.
Wrote it down. And maybe you can talk a little bit at this time about, I know some people are writers here, and talk a little bit about memoir and essays, because your approach, I think, is unique. And I think some people would like to hear about why you decided to do it in essays, or how this evolved.
Yeah, I don't know why, Gilda. I think
You're
it's just the way things came to me. I've written different books with were different processes, but this just happened. I mean, I was just writing the things that came to me that seemed important, that had some sort of an impetus, like I said, a collision, something that would cause some things to rub together to cause a little bit of fire. And I just I never thought about writing a book about New York. I was writing these things as they came to me, both poems and essays. And then at some point I thought, wow, there's like a magnetic center that these iron filings are kind of going towards. And I began to look at them that way, so that, I've written a collection of essays before, and they are connected, but they're more independent essays that do not form exactly a memoir in essays. And this is one that I really wanted to connect. And so when I started to put together all the disparate pieces, I had many, many, many essays and different pieces. And I started to say, okay, I think here's what they're going toward. And a lot of it was the music, was the idea of sound, and but also keyholes through which you see things. And so, then I decided that's it. I'm going to go in. And I did violent revisions on many of the essays that had originally been published. So, I mean, they were done. I was happy with them as they were. But when I started to put them together, I thought, no. And so I took out like 2 or 3 of my favorite ones and just said, no, you don't go. You're not going. Sorry. And then others, like the very brief piece, that was part of a longer essay that had. And so I cut that essay into, I think, 4 or 5 pieces, maybe, I can't quite remember, and sprinkled them throughout the book to try to get a design, a pattern that felt felt whole. I don't know if it succeeds or not, but that was my feeling when I put the book together.
Yeah, it was interesting earlier this week, it came out, the essay, ASSAY, essay interview project. And you have a whole section in there that you talk about it. And I was like really intrigued with that because, I think of my own students, and when you talk about, I believe in violent revisions whenever necessary. And I was just so excited, I'll be using that. But also the fact that you wrote, Rebecca, about not putting some of your favorite essays in it because it didn't go with the flow of the whole story. And I was just delighted to read that. When your book came out, I bought it right away, and I thought, I should read it closer to the time I was going to interview you, but I couldn't. I really wanted to read it, and then I was so glad that I did because it gave me an opportunity from the fall to now to live with this story and these images and go back and look at them. And they are images that kind of hang in there for me. I'm really like, they just keep coming back. And that has to mean something, Rebecca, about the way you write, which is beautiful. And also just the imagery of New York, because as I've always told people, I always wanted to live in New York. And I wondered, you were going to live there for 2 years and you stayed for 11. How did you, so I guess I have a couple questions. Do you want to go back, or why did you stay longer than 2?
Well, we stayed longer than 2 because things worked out. We were lucky.
Yeah.
We grew to learn, and the thing is too about life, isn't it kind of like a snowball? It gathers weight and everything goes faster, and you turn around and you go, damn, was I here 11 years? And we probably would have stayed a lot longer, but things, we needed to start making preparations for taking care of parents. There were family obligations. There were other things that brought us back quite back into Charlotte. But 2 of my nieces ended up going there just almost like ships passing. They're up there now. Wow. And have been there. And we do love the city. The book was supposed to come out in the spring, early last year, and things were so terrible in New York. And I just asked my publisher if we could possibly put it off until September, thinking, as we all thought, by September things are going to be so much better, right? It just seemed wrong to me to be even equating, particularly because there's 9/11 essays in here, anything with there's nothing to equate with what New Yorkers were going through at that point and what so many places are going through now. So but anyway, I still love the city. Who knows? I never say never. Yeah, we may end up there yet, but I think,
I remember when you left and everyone was so sad. And then everyone would say, well, how's Rebecca doing? It would go around the writing community about how she's doing. And I wonder if there's anybody who has some questions that they want to ask you, Rebecca. I don't know if anyone has written anything in the chat, or if you want to just kind of raise your hand. And Vivian, maybe you're the first one who raised your hand. You can unmute. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I wrote my questions in the chat. Rebecca, I was a student of yours at Queen. Yeah,
indeed.
So great to see you. And so one of the things that I learned from you was a lot about form and structure. And so when you started to speak a little bit about a memoir of essays, and then you talked about flash and the poetry. And so my question was, how did you format your book? Is it chronological? Is there a heart? You talked about the magnetic center. And so I think part of your wonderful skill is this whole idea of how to put it all together. And so I'm very curious on your method and what was the heart of it and how you structured around it, please. Yeah.
Hey, Vivian, good to see you.
So great to see you. I'm so pleased.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, structure and form are not something that are integral to it. It's part of the heart of the writing as well. I think people, when they go, oh yeah, you're a structure freak, or you're into, so that I'm into the heart of it. But the structure and the form and the shape of any kind of art is just so much a part of how you receive it as a writer. And Howard Nemeroff, who we're talking about form in poetry, said something about that it keeps us from being stupider than the law allows, which I think is pretty funny. But I think it really is true. We have to find the shape and the proper form for it. Proper may be the wrong word, but I mean, the magnetic center, first of all, so much about memoir. Of course, memoir isn't me more, and it certainly isn't the congressional record, for God's sake. Let's hope not, where this happened and then this happened to me and this happened to me and this happened. Isn't it interesting? Of course not. Of course it never is. It's a selection process. It's saying, okay, what pattern or shape or design do I see all of these pieces? How are they touching? That's why I like the idea of magnetic center. What are they pulled to? What are certain things here? And I think for most writers, there is a particular center that you are always going to go back to. Each person may have it might be a place and time that certain people are obsessed by, or a person, or an idea. But most of your writing, I think, will tend to do that. Mine has always been in any genre I'm writing, whatever, this question of where do I leave off and others begin? It's always been a question of community, of responsibility to those we love, to the stranger. That's just what I'm interested in. And so it's what I notice when I'm writing. So, but I decided, like Gilda said, to leave out quite a few things. And I had help from wonderful people. I see Fleta Brown right there, and Leah Papura, and some of my colleagues and fellow writers who read. In fact, Leah, gave me the suggestion of the sound, the music that was going through, which I had not realized. And I started looking, I said, oh my gosh, every single piece has something about music. Even the Long Cancer essay, the cancer, where I hear the man down the hall who is dying. And it's like an opera of shared pain between his wife, and they would just kind of sing back in this horrible sound, which makes me think about now and what's happening so much with so many people. So I think that it helps to have readers, smart fellow writers and readers who can say to you, oh, this is what I saw in it. And you go, oh, really? Wow, you're right. And not when we start to put these things together. But I don't know, Vivian, a lot is what you leave out. Memoir is so much about what you leave out and select. And then from the pieces that are left, what kind of design do they make that can touch the reader? So I'm not Abraham Lincoln, so people don't really care about every little thing that happened to me. So really this book is only about, say, the first 5 years that we were there.
Okay.
Kind of the newcomer years. So anyway,
thank you.
Yeah, that was kind of a long answer. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great answer.
Good question, though.
Yeah. How long did it take to put the memoir? Tamara Wilson asked, how long did it take to put the memoir together? When did you know, okay, I have enough essays to do this.
Yeah, it wasn't just enough. I had way more than enough essays. I think it was more when I felt, I think probably, I don't know. They were written over a period of 10 years. And probably it was about 3 years in shaping them and cutting it, you know.
Thank
It
you.
kind of hurts to let go of things sometimes.
Rebecca, I so appreciate that. And even some of your comments in the front, because I take a long time. And so when I saw that you took a long time, it just made me feel, okay, you know.
It's not a horse race.
It's not a, yeah, yeah. How did you decide, and maybe this, I don't know if this is our last question, Ada, what do you think? I don't know, I'll ask it and then you can let me know. How did you decide on the trajectory besides arriving and departing New York?
Yeah, well, that wasn't the trajectory. I mean, like I say, it was really just the first 5 years. You know, it was more about what I call vibrations. Um, for instance, the very end of the book, called Ginkgo Song, ends with another park event where I go to the park in the early morning and watch the sleepers awake, the people that are stretched out on the, that maybe have slept there. Well, you're not supposed to sleep all night, but some do, the bench. And so that it was kind of, in a way, a circle, but by the time I was back in the park, I was changed. And so I found that little vibration point at the end. And, you know, that's something that I feel like, and I think in that, the interview you're talking about from USA that Stacey Morrison did, I think I talk about that. She says, well, how do you know when it's time to end something? Or how do you know when it's, you know, what's the trajectory and when do you stop and get out? And I said, you know, a long time ago, I started thinking, I'm not going to call them endings anymore. I'm going to call them openings.
I remember you said
Or
that.
vibrations. It's yeah, that when you feel, well, this is a mixed metaphor, but when all the plates are spinning, like, you know, the circus guy is spinning all the plates and they're all up there spinning and they're not quite falling down yet, but they're all spinning at the same time. And you know, that is as alive as it is ever going to be, that all of the pieces are aligned and it's as alive as it can ever be. Get out. Because then the reader comes in and can complete it. So I'm not really too fond about really tying things up with a bow, and, you know, and that's what I think about George Washington. I learned that in 5th grade. That was helpful, but it's not helpful for the kind of writing that I'm trying to do. So I don't know if that answers it, but it's intuitive. It is in some ways musical. It is saying, okay, have I lined everything up as well as I can, where it is now the reader's job to come in and to complete the transaction that I have begun. So I don't want to leave anything confusing, but I want to leave enough mystery so it's time for the reader to make it their book, their experience. That just sounds so woo-hoo. I don't know if that answers or not, but that it's a feeling, and quite often I will go too long in early drafts. I usually draft sometimes 6, 7 times before an essay, before I really know what it's about. And then I end up cutting the opening, because I was just like what my students call throat clearing. And then at the end, I've written my way out of it to tell myself what I just said, where I should have just stopped right back there, which is probably what I should have just done with this question. But anyway, yeah,
No,
it's intuitive, but get good readers, get good people to help you read and to tell you what's kind of souring there, or where, like, I got it already. And then you rake away what you don't need, and let the rest rise.
That was a beautiful answer, Rebecca.
Oh, I don't know.
I'm so grateful for that answer. I really am. For some of my students who are here, you know, I'm like, just keep going over and let it rise, and just, I've never used the word rise like you have, but just, I really believe in attitude and waiting. Sometimes life makes you wait sometimes for a piece. And so, were there any more questions here?
There are two more that I think Rebecca has sort of spoken to, but I'll read them for the record. Rhea asks, can you please explain what white space means? And then I'm going to read the other one from Tara, because I do think, again, they're related. At what point in your writing process do you give your manuscript to someone to read to get feedback? For example, someone gave you the music and imagery feedback. And how do you feel anticipating that feedback? So white space, and when to ask for feedback.
Well, I think visual artists would probably have a much better explanation for what white space is. But okay, for instance, if you silence is very important, and in music, of course, we can't have any music without silence. You have to have the space between the notes. You can't just imagine if there was no white space, no silence. It would all be just a cacophony of constant noise. It would not be music without the rests, without that. So there's that. But white space, I think about it, for instance, in a segmented poem, or any place on the page can be a visual space. That just stops the reader for a moment and lets them either rest or think about what just came before, or perhaps make the leap into what's about to happen. So it's a resting place. That's what I think of with it. You can show it physically on the page with asterisks or with the actual white space, but it is actually, to my mind, something that I'm saying, okay, reader, you do something, just a little bit. It might just it's like a chapter beginning or ending. When you read a chapter book, say a novel, they don't always transition between the first chapter and second chapter. When you pick up, if it ends with the protagonist being 10 years old and she's in a garden, and in the next chapter you wake up and she's has a baby in her arms, you fill in that there was something happened between the two of those things. And to me, that's what white space is too. In poetry, for me, it's quite often the way that the line breaks come to give a little musical and breathing space. That's about the best I can do. I think visual artists know much more about the idea of white space. I'm just using it, that's my term, but I'm sure that isn't really the way that most artists would speak of it.
So white space does anticipate the reader's interaction with the writing. And so at what point do you invite people to read your work?
Okay, yeah. Well, when I've done everything I can do on my own to try to get to the truth, and if I have already done all the things that I believe I should be doing in this piece, in the writing, I've taken it as absolutely far as I can. And sometimes that's 2 drafts, sometimes that's 11 drafts, and sometimes it doesn't go in the trash because I don't trash anything, but it goes into my nope, not now folder. This is not ready. This is not working. You know that. I think a writer knows that, has a sense. But when I've done everything I can, and I think like, okay, I need a couple of really smart people to read this and just say, And then if what they say is something been in the back of your mind. You think, oh yeah, I kind of knew that, but I was hoping I could get away with it, kind of thing. Or that's one thing. Sometimes, criticism's criticism. It's helpful. You can take it with an open heart, and you can thank someone, and go your own way with it. But sometimes if you really think about what a smart reader's told you, you say, damn, they were right. I got to go back to the drawing board again. So I never send anything to anyone until I feel like it's as good. I've done everything I can on my own. I really have. And before I send it to an editor or something, could I please get your feedback?
Mhm.
And,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This has been just heartwarming.